Trump's tariffs will keep the global cork industry afloat.
Trump's tariffs are going to help the global cork industry.
Yes, this industry that made this glorious, whatever this is, will be kept afloat by Trump's tariffs. Here we go. Welcome to the knock-on effect, where we start with the thing you know and end up in a strange place. Joining me today is my terrific co-host, Justine Underhill.
Ooh.
And the man who knows all the tricks of the trade, the professor himself, Roger Hurst.
Hello, everybody.
Roger, you're looking very vintage today.
Yeah.
1920s, 1930s?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I look like a mobster or a maitre d'?
A little mix of both. You look like you could be at a jazz club.
I will say, if you came up to me at a restaurant, I would be scared for my life and not excited for my table. So I think a little more mobster. So Justine, Roger and I are going to try to get you from trade crackdown to cork sales.
Okay.
And your job is to try to figure out where we're going before we do get there.
I have a few ideas.
All right, good. And then after we complete that journey, it's time for a second segment, 10 Reasons, where we'll hear about why millennials should own gold, according to our friend Jake. But let's get right into it with a trade crackdown here. We're going to start here with tariffs, the great American trade crackdown. Now, we all know the headlines is that Donald Trump is not happy about the trade deficit the U.S. has with the world, where the U.S. imports more than it ships out. So he's announced tariffs on, in other words, taxes on the goods of the EU, Mexico, and Canada, and China. There's a little more specifics on the EU, Canada, and Mexico, which is strange because they're America's closest allies. China, he's talked about imposing tariffs on $50 billion of industrial goods, although it hasn't gotten a lot more specific than that. So that's what we all know, but Roger, give us some of the context here.
Trump has done exactly what he said he would do, which is imposing tariffs on its trade partners. And I think there was an expectation that there would be this negotiation phase at the end of which all these tariffs would sort of effectively could not happen. But actually, he's gone for it. And as you say, it's all about these trade deficits. US has a big trade deficit. China has a big surplus. The US is basically having these tariffs put on all the major partners with whom it has a significant deficit.
Now, before we go any deeper, do you care to guess how we get to?
Yeah, I'm ready for a guess.
Go for it.
Okay. We're going to have more difficult trade relations with China. So even though they say it's on hold, there's still the tensions there.
Okay.
And because of that, we're going to import less hardwood flooring. We know that Lumber Liquidators has had the whole scandal in China. We're going to import less hardwood flooring from China.
Okay.
And so people are going to look for alternatives to hardwood flooring. And so maybe go with something like cork.
All right, so they're going to refloor their living room with cork.
I did.
You did?
Yeah. Well, not my living room. Actually, I did. My living room, yeah.
Isn't it a little...
It's really springy. It actually feels really great under your
fun.
feet. Yeah, yeah. So, but that's my guess. Is it right?
No.
Okay.
but I learned something new about your living room, so that's exciting. So the first knock-on effect here is revenge, retaliation.
Oh, dangerous.
Yes. So Roger, let's zoom in on China here and talk about some of the retaliatory.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you. Measures that China is trying to take.
Well, exactly. We've seen China unveil these retaliatory duties on US food imports, and food is one of the big areas that they've been looking at, including pork, fruit, nuts and wine, and these are somewhere between 15 and 25% tariffs on each of those as a response to Trump's administration, the new tariffs on steel and aluminium imports, and this was reported in the FT recently. Beijing has said that the additional duties will exist on 128 kinds of products of US origin in order to safeguard China's interests and balance the losses caused by the United States' additional tariffs. So we're really getting into tit-for-tat territory here.
Interesting. And that, I mean, so there's been a huge amount of food safety scares in China. So importing a lot of these goods from the US has been a huge business. I do know that.
Yes, yes. And China is developing more of an interest and taste for protein as their middle class increases. So,
yeah.
But I think you know which one I'm gonna
go with. I think I have, yeah.
Yes, it is gonna be wine. It is gonna be wine. We're going to Cork. We're gonna take a stop at wine. Now, according...
I do want to say first for the audience,
Yes.
Alex is a huge wine monger. Is that the correct? Sommelier, wine snob. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
But he will spend or drop a few $100s on a bottle of wine at a restaurant. So just for a little background.
Yeah.
Sorry to expose you there.
No, it's fine. People, my salt of the earth image is going to be blown completely.
Right.
I can sell back that tractor now. So I'm going to focus on the wine. According to the California Wine Institute, Chinese tariffs on U.S. wine imports have risen from, as a result of this, 48% to 68%.
Wait, that's insane.
So-
well, the fact that they were almost 50% and then they're even higher now.
Yeah, so as a Chinese person buying a nice bottle of California Cabernet, you're paying almost double what you should be paying if not for the tariff. So I'm going to quote here from Decanter magazine. Do you read?
Of course, you are a subscriber, I'm sure.
So they talked to someone who runs a company that imports California wines into China. Recently, we called off a 40-foot shipping container from Napa Valley. We also have 500 cases of undeclared wines in the supervision warehouse in Shanghai. Since this trade war was caused by the political contest between China and the United States, as a wine importer, there is really little we can do except wait for a miracle.
Wait, who said that?
This is the sales director of Napa Reserve Fine Wines, who
Wow.
imports California wines into China. So, I mean, they're saying, wow, we're not going to be able to sell this wine at these rates.
So the increase from basically 48 to 60% made enough difference.
Right. And so now if we, similar actually to the Red Velvet Cake episode, if we stopped here, we would see, people are being hurt by tariffs. And that's true, but there's also another side of the story. There's someone who's being helped by this. And do you care to take a guess at who's getting helped?
Who's getting helped? Does it have something to do with Cork? Eventually.
Eventually. The answer is Australia.
I would have guessed France, actually.
So Australia is a huge trade partner to China in a whole lot of things. But recently, this year alone, they've seen Australian wine exports rise 51% year over year.
I didn't even know that Australia had a big wine industry.
Yeah, they were associated with kind of low-end, cheapo wines, but they've really started to
Stepped up their game.
Yeah, and they do make some great wine. But so far in the year to March, they sold $750 million worth of wine to China.
Wow.
It's $2.6 billion over the past year, and they've just seen explosive, incredible growth. So as China drinks more and more wine, Australia is really...
So they don't have the same tariffs on Australian wine.
So this is what I was going to get to. Their tariffs were cut at the beginning of this year from 5.6% to less than 3%. And the tariffs are going away entirely in 2019.
Is this because of what's going on with the U.S.?
Australia has a really good relationship with China. I should note that in the short term, there has been actually some trouble because Australia has looked at passing this bill that China doesn't like, and so China has held up some of their wine imports from them.
Held it hostage.
Yeah, as it were. But in the longer scheme of things, Australia and China do really great trade together, and they're saying we're not going to charge you any tariffs at all, which is something that Chile already enjoys, and Chile sends a lot of cheap wine to China right now. So we've gotten to Australia's wine industry, and I want to take a bit of a detour here and talk about. Let's get a little deeper into the wine side of it. So with that, I'd like Scott exhibits A and B, if you would be so kind. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Hard times at Real Vision. We're drinking wine out of paper bags here. So I have here 2 bottles, and I'll let you inspect them.
Yes. 2015, a great year for Shiraz.
I don't know. Sure. Yeah.
Oh, is this Australian?
So these are both Australian.
Oh, wow. Have you had Australian wine?
I have, not a whole lot, but...
So what is this one? This is 2014.
Yeah, this is a mix of Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignon. Okay. The most obvious difference, though, if you really knew nothing about wine, is up here.
The size? The cork?
Yes. Well, this one has a cork hidden in here.
Yes.
This one is a screw top. So there's no cork.
The quality of the wine is signified by the cork versus the screw?
And here's where I'm going, because in the U.S., often we say screw top, crappy wine. Really, it's more a matter of where the wine comes from. Oh,
so don't judge a wine by its screw top.
Not necessarily. often more expensive wines will have corks, but that's more tradition than anything else. And Roger, this actually is really salient for the Australian wine industry in particular.
Yeah, the Australians, they currently, 99 out of every 100 bottles that they produce will be sealed with a screw top. And that's very much been a growing business or a growing theme. And this really comes back from the 1970s. So in the 1970s, cork demand, the highest quality cork went to shoe manufacturers, particularly designer shoes. The second highest quality cork went to the old world wineries, particularly Bordeaux. And when the Australians eventually got their hands on cork, they got the lowest quality cork. And the problem with cork, at least until quite recently, but there's cork taint. So this is where you hear the word corked on a wine. And this is basically a fungus that grows in the cork. And it causes the wine to go off colour and taste somewhat vinegary. So it's not a particularly nice flavour. So in Australia, rather than continue to use the lowest quality cork, they decided to go more and more towards screw tops. And today, 98 to 99% of Australian wines are now given a screw top.
Wow, what is this cork even made out of?
Oh, it's...
Is it balsa wood?
No, it's made from cork. They're cork trees.
I have never seen a cork tree.
Yeah, they're cork trees primarily in Portugal. They cull the cork and they put them into all these uses. So
and then they sell the worst ones to Australia. I feel like Australia could have been like, hey guys, give us some better cork.
Well, so it's interesting because for a long time, and I'll just make a little public service announcement here, wines being corked was relatively common. It was like 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 wines had TCA, had this cork taint. And now they x-ray the corks and they have way better ways to do it. So this is, by the way, when you order a wine at a restaurant.
You smell the cork.
Yes, and you taste the wine. The reason you taste the wine is public service announcement. It's not to see if you like it. It's not, oh, this is a little too fruity. It's to make sure the wine is okay. If the wine is okay, you have bought the wine, please drink it. It's just to see if the wine. So actually,
has the cork taint.
Yeah. So now it's completely outdated. Like you really don't have to taste wines anymore at restaurants before you drink them.
Do you ever smell the cork when you get the wine?
Yeah, it doesn't tell you anything though. Smell the glass. Make sure the glass is clean. That's the only thing I do. So this is your final chance to guess how we're already well in the world of cork.
Okay. So the end point is that cork prices or cork
that the cork industry will stay afloat.
Will stay afloat.
Kind of a pun. Yeah.
Okay. So cork will do well, even though, so that seems to be the opposite though. So I would think that because Australian wine is surging and there's so much demand and they're using so much, 99% is using screw tops, that they'll stop using that cork. The cork industry could go out of business.
Yes, but there is one final knock-on effect here because they are selling to China. And you know who is not down with screw tops?
Chinese.
Correct.
Oh, because they want the more fancier, more higher-end seeming wine.
Yeah, I mean, they're used to wine from France. And, you know, even in the U.S., there's I probably wouldn't bring a screw top wine to a party because it's a red wine because people think of it as not as expensive, which is often true, but not true for Australian wine. But for China, they actually did a study here, and according to Wine Intelligence.
Wine intelligence?
Wine Intelligence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 60% of survey respondents said that they preferred cork, and China was had the greatest preference toward cork, with 32% saying they wouldn't buy screw top wines.
Oh, wow.
So this is actually having a real effect on Australian winemakers because when they sell their wine to China, even though they'll put a screw top in when they sell it to their compatriots.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? They will put a cork in it when they're sending it to China. I have a stat here that 80% of the wines Australia and New Zealand send to China are closed with a cork, even though 99% of their own wines are closed with a screw top.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, kind of solves the puzzle here, which is that as Australia sends more wine to China, they'll put corks in more of their wine.
Okay.
So Roger, now that we've kind of finished the journey, who really stands to benefit here?
So yeah, it's the Portuguese cork producers in Portugal. They produce about 70% of the world's cork. It's a massive industry. 17,000 people are employed. It's something like 2.3% of all exports are the cork industry. So it's really for Portugal and Portugal's cork manufacturers that are going to benefit as the Australians increase the amount of corks they use in their wines to export to the Chinese.
Yeah, and some of these cork producers there have been cork bankruptcies. These companies were really falling on hard times.
Wow.
And this really could save them. And actually, these cork producers, the industry groups are going to China to lobby, saying no aluminum, and trying to, because the broader picture is, I really do think higher tariffs on American wine in China in retaliation for U.S. tariffs will be good for the cork industry in the short term. In the longer term, China is about to become the second largest consumer of wine in the world.
Yes.
And if they continue to like cork, I mean, the cork industry is going to do very well. And the final thing is that I mentioned counterfeiting. There are estimates that 50 to 60% of expensive wines in China are counterfeited. So cork is very nice.
Are they're making the wine in China, or they're just taking the thing and putting another label on it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a stat that a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, each bottle is filled an average of 7 times.
Oh, that's gross.
Right, and the nice thing about corks, though, is that it tells you a story about the wine. It tells you can see how old the cork looks, and when you pull it out, you can see how soaked it is from the wine. It tells you a lot about the age and the quality of the wine.
Interesting.
Whereas a screw top doesn't tell you as much. So that's another reason why cork might continue to do well in China. But if they can convince Chinese that, as people are starting to change their mind in the U.S., screw tops are cool and hip.
Yeah.
Cork industry is in trouble again.
Cool.
So there you go. What are your takeaways here?
Well, this really reminds me of kind of what we were talking about last week, which was with beer. There's this illusion that beer in bottles is better than beer in cans. Same thing here.
I know. I feel like we might have to go to like a meeting sometime soon.
Yeah, right, with all this alcohol.
Yeah.
No, but corks have this illusion of being more prestigious than screw tops.
This is coffee, by the way. Just letting you guys know.
Wait, so because of that, it's sort of like people are undervaluing certain types of wine, certain types of beer, certain types of all sorts of different products because of the illusion of prestige. And that's huge. That has huge impacts on trade relations. That has huge impacts on countries like Portugal and the cork industry. I mean, so it's sort of like you see all these trickle-down effects.
And the other interesting thing about the story is that Chinese demands are going to rule the world. I mean, we kind of talked about Chinese political power, and that's a bit of hard power saying, hey, if you pass this law, we're not going to let as much wine in. The soft power of Chinese consumers who are just collectively making these decisions of, we like cork, no, we like screw caps. That is just like U.S. consumers kind of ruled everything that was made in the world. And there's that story about Coke changing their recipe in Madagascar, the vanilla bean industry. Maybe I should save that for a different knock.
Yeah, save that for later.
But Chinese consumers are going to be the ones who, as they drive the growth in the world, are going to be the ones that all these companies are going to have to cater to.
Yeah, and actually, I know luxury products have been a huge thing in China, and so they've been actually fueling a lot of the luxury goods markets for like handbags, Chanel, all sorts of things, and moving away from the knockoffs. So that's going to be a big impact.
Knockoffs, knock-ons. Roger, what are you taking away?
The Chinese are very, very important. So, for instance, outside of the US, Hong Kong was the most important centre for wine auctions last year, and we're seeing this. We're seeing wine prices, particularly at the top end, have already been driven beyond most people's reach. So it's great that other countries are now coming into the game, because there's some fantastic wines in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, the USA, not just old world Europe. And if the Chinese demand and the Chinese interest picks up in those regions, it might take some of the pressure so that Alex can afford his Burgundies and Bordeaux once more.
Yeah, I hope so. All right, so let's put a cork in it, because it's time for our new segment, 10 Reasons, which is where we give someone 10 chances to change our minds. And today, we're going to talk about gold. And this is
your favorite topic.
This is the part where I reveal that I don't own any gold. And
you are really winning points with the audience right now.
And to be honest, it's not just that I think of gold as a collectible with a fancy backstory. Sorry. If you are going to own gold, it makes more sense to own it later in life. Maybe it's a hedge. Maybe it holds value better than currency. But if you're can stand the volatility in stocks and real estate and hell, even wine
or cork,
like your floor, I think you might be better off hanging on to that for the next 50 years or so. Sorry, but let's see if my mind can be changed here. And to try to do so is Jake Merle. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm glad to be here.
All right, Jake's another member of our glorious editorial team here at Real Vision. And you are going to give us 10 reasons why young people, such as us, should own gold.
Yeah, so I think there are 10 reasons why millennials, and everyone for that matter, should own some gold.
Okay.
The first reason is that gold is an alternate form of savings. It's not an investment like stocks, bonds, or real estate, but should be considered more like cash, or let's say a bank deposit. But unlike a bank deposit, gold has no yield, no counterparty risk, and no inflation risk. Everyone talks about diversifying their portfolio, but no one talks about diversifying their savings or the unit of account in which they save. So moving on to the second reason. Gold is basically based on supply and demand. All other assets are pretty much based on the discounted cash flow model. So it's good to own an asset that isn't based on interest rates. Okay. And so moving on, the third reason is that gold basically has no correlation to stocks. This is the reason investors diversify in the first place. The fourth reason is geopolitical. Right now, Russia and China are buying gold, and they've actually tripled their gold reserves since the Great Financial Crisis. And actually, if you look at a chart of central bankers buying gold, they've been net buyers since 2008 as well. So if China, Russia, the United States, and the IMF own gold, you probably should too. So the fifth reason is technology. Technology is changing at such a rapid pace that it's kind of impossible to predict the future. So if there's a breakthrough in technology that might impact the security of your digital assets going forward, how do you hedge that? By owning gold, you can hedge cyber threats, hacks, and confiscation. So the sixth reason is that world reserve currencies change every 100 years or so, and that has been the case for the past millennium. To bet against that would be basically betting against history. So the seventh reason is the paper derivatives market. Right now, there's roughly 100 paper claims for every ounce of physical gold. And right now, the price of physical gold is set through the paper market. So if this pricing dynamic were to change in the future, physical gold would probably catch a bid. So the eighth reason is right now, investors currently have a 1.25% allocation to gold in their portfolios. So if that allocation were to become higher, let's say 3%, 5%, even 10%, demand for gold would rise, and so would the price. So the ninth reason is the United States currently has $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. There's a bunch of different estimates, but that's on the upper end of that range, which is roughly 1,000% of GDP. The United States will probably print that money in the future. And so finally, the 10th reason is that all currencies have failed throughout history. There hasn't been a single currency that's withstood the test of time. Even take a look at a chart of King dollar since 1913, it goes straight down. And if you take a look at a chart of gold, it goes straight up. So which asset would you rather own?
Jake you make a very compelling case. I just want to clear up one thing though. So you have physical gold somewhere in your house? I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, you can hold it in a vault abroad. Or
do you have the combination? What's the combination of your safe, by the way?
That I can't give you.
So, but seriously, you hold. I'm kind of interested in so you have it like somewhere in your house to keep it out of the financial system, and it's physical and.
Absolutely, you could have a portion of your gold at your home hidden somewhere, and you should probably have most of your gold outside the country in a private vault outside of the banking system.
I think I see you looking on in glee. I feel like you're on board here.
I mean, so.
And he does make a very compelling case.
Like Jake, you make a very compelling point. I think, part of it though is that you do have, if you're keeping it outside the country, you do have all these fees. It was interesting because there was a Simon Mikhailovich interview a few weeks ago with Grant Williams, and he was talking about how it was difficult keeping some of this gold overseas.
Oh, you just schlep it in a suitcase down the street.
Yeah, he was left on the street with his bags of gold. But Simon made a very good point, which is what you're making. It's good to have something outside of the financial system. If you have insurance on your car, you have insurance on your house, you have insurance on your portfolio.
If the global financial system goes busto, I have bigger problems. Where am I going to get my money to buy my Australian wine?
You'd be in better shape if you had some gold.
And what you need to do, though, and I think this happened in Argentina, is that you don't think about gold necessarily being bars of gold in the sort of Fort Knox style, but think about small trinkets. And in a lot of countries where they've had problems, financial problems, a lot of the currency became small rings, lower quality trinkets, ones that basically you can charge, because you don't want to walk around with a kilogram of gold to buy a loaf of bread, but you can with maybe some low quality gold rings. So gold that you have at your home doesn't have to be in bars. It can just be jewelry.
Alex doesn't look convinced here.
No, it's just like
three of us.
I just hate the idea of schlepping around gold to say, that looks like a really nice piece of sushi. Can I give you this gold ring for it? I mean, listen, in all seriousness, gold has saved a lot of people in times of catastrophe. Gold, diamonds, harder to counterfeit than wine, which is a good thing. But I'm not a huge cryptocurrency buff, but maybe there is some way to just keep your money digitally and keep it out of the financial system rather than hold these bars under your sink. I mean, it seems ridiculous. Your super could come in and take them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's room for that in your portfolio as well.
So yeah, it's a diversified portfolio, I think, is the argument.
All right, I like it. I'm not convinced, but I like it. Thank you, Jake.
Yep.
All right, well, that you can stick around for the goodbye here. That does it for this week on the Knock-On Effect. Thanks for joining us. We have a new episode every Thursday on Real Vision, and we're doing trying something out, starting a longer podcast version that we're releasing every Thursday evening on your podcast feed under Real Vision Presents.
Yeah, so you should check that one out as well.
I mean, you don't necessarily have to, if you watched it, you have to listen.
If you want more information, you should check out the podcast. And if you want more on finance and the economy, make sure to go to realvision.com/knock-on effect, where you can sign up for your 14-day free trial.
Which is why don't you give a pitch while you're here for the 14-day free trial, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, you guys should sign up.
and listen to the Simon Mikhailovich interview.
Yeah, that's a good one. Cool. All right, well, thanks for joining us.
Let's crack open these bottles.
No.